Welcome, traveller, to Stories, Fables, Ghostly Tales. Tonight, you will walk with detectives branded in monsters' blood. Their names are Malary left and Dogdin right. The town of Larch Hollow is waiting, its snow blackened, its hunger restless. A priest's voice calls from beneath the church floorboards, and when the Wendigo whispers your name, will you answer? Sit very still. The stories are about to begin. Hollow Hunger. Chapter 1. A letter drenched in frost. The envelope was sealed with deer hide. Not paper, not wax. Just thick, sinewed hide, yellowed like teeth and stitched shut with black thread. It arrived at dusk. Dogdin Wright held it in gloved hands, the stink of cold rot rising from it like breath from a grave.
Mail,
He muttered.
or something pretending to be it.
Malary left. Didn't answer. He was sharpening his kukri. He never spoke when Steele was singing. Dogdin cut the stitching open with a scalpel he used only for cursed texts. The parchment inside was written in bone meal ink. The handwriting trembled, like someone trying not to scream. The letter started, "To whom it may concern."
If you are who I think you are, I am the last priest of Larch Hollow. Our town is gone, not in the way cities fall, not to war, not plague, but gone in the way a man disappears into himself. There is something in our woods. It eats, and what it doesn't eat, it becomes. It walks on legs stolen from the devout. It speaks in the voices of the missing. It feeds off the regret. It took Father Briar first, then it took me. I write this with hands that are no longer mine. Please, come before the thaw, before it wakes again, or maybe don't. Because when it calls you by your name, you'll answer. May your souls be hungrier than it are.
Dogdin read the letter aloud, slowly, voice flat. When he finished, Malary stopped sharpening. The blade glinted, etched with old black script in no human tongue. Malary said only 2 words. "Suit up." They drove north. 2 days through skeletal trees and ice roads slick with black snow. Malary didn't speak. He never did on the way to a hunt. Dogdin whispered lore to himself, filling silence with the names of dead things. The heater barely worked. Cold crept through vents like a warning. The windshield fogged with breath that wasn't always theirs. They stopped at a gas station 40 miles from Larch Hollow. Empty, but not abandoned. There were footprints in the snow. Bare, human, bleeding. And not just one set. Multiple. Like a line of people had walked into the forest behind the station, without coats, without shoes, without reason. Dogdin sniffed the air.
Copper,
He muttered.
salt, grief.
He leaned down, brushed frost from a trail of bloody toes.
This was a feeding line.
Malary cracked his knuckles. His left arm twitched, the tattooed runes beneath his skin pulsing faintly. One of them opened its eye. They made it to Larch Hollow at nightfall. The town was dying. Not abandoned. Dying. Every house leaned. Roofs collapsed under the weight of a snow that never melted. No children, no dogs, no birds. Just eyes behind curtains, watching. And the wind, moving wrong, like it bent around things that weren't there. They parked outside a church. Its steeple was broken, hanging like a snapped neck. A crucifix lay in the snow, gnawed. Malary drew his kukri. Dogdin reached into his coat and pulled out a flask filled with preserved Wendigo bile. He drank it without blinking.
To understand a monster, you must first agree to be devoured.
Malary said nothing. He just kicked the church door open. They entered inside. Silence. Cold. And something worse. On the altar, a jawbone. Clean. Human. Still wet. And behind it, claw marks carved into the stone, deep enough that something had dug down through it, in agony or hunger, or both. Dogdin stepped forward, examined the marks, ran a finger across them, bled.
Teeth from the inside. Someone bit their way out of their own mouth.
And then they heard it, a sound from deep beneath the chapel floorboards. Not a growl, not a whisper, something between a prayer and a plea. A voice, calling.
Left, right. I remember your taste.
Dogdin looked at Malary. His eyes were glassy, unblinking. And then he said, not to Malary, but to the voice below.
We are not here to save you. We are here to starve you.
Chapter 2, Lore of the Frozen Moor. The motel reeked of mildew and dusted corpses. They took the last room, number 13. No heater, no key, just a Bible in the drawer, with the pages glued shut by congealed blood. Malary sat on the edge of the bed. He stared at his hands like he was trying to remember what they used to feel like before all the killing. He'd never ask questions. That was Dogdin's job. Dogdin unpacked 3 things: a silver lantern, a leather-bound codex made from stitched Wendigo skin, and a jar filled with frozen molars. He set them on the floor, formed a circle of salt around them. Then he lit the lantern. The room changed. The shadows pulled in tight, suddenly terrified. The air got thick, heavy with whispers like a funeral being held in reverse. Dogdin cracked the codex open.
This isn't the first time Larch Hollow called for help.
Malary said nothing. Dogdin turned pages, fast, hungry, manic. Symbols spilled across the walls, reflections of language older than time. Each one danced and bled. Some bit their own tails. Others wept black pus.
This town was cursed twice. First by starvation, then by repentance.
He licked his fingertip and touched a sigil. It sizzled.
The Wendigo here is an old kind, not just a man who ate flesh.
He looked up, face grave.
This one chose to starve over and over, even after the hunger took root.
Dogdin's fingers were trembling.
They say he was a priest, Preacher Briar, wandered into the woods during the winter famine, telling people he'd fast until God answered.
He turned the page, stopped. There was a photo, black and white, blurred, showed a man in a torn cassock, smiling in a way that promised pain.
God never answered, but something else did.
The lantern flickered. Something moved in the salt ring. Malary stood fast, kukri in hand. The runes on his forearm flared red like fresh opened wounds. They pulsed, hummed, hungered. Dogdin's eyes rolled back. He spoke in a voice not his own.
The Cold One does not feed to live. It feeds so you may not. It becomes your memory, your regret, your hunger.
Malary grabbed Dogdin by the collar and slapped him back to reality. Dogdin gasped, blinked.
Sorry. Got too close.
They sat in silence for a moment, just breathing, just feeling how cold the room had gotten. Dogdin pointed to the molars in the jar.
These belonged to victims. Teeth tell stories, especially when pulled before death.
He unscrewed the lid and dropped 3 into his mouth. Bit down. Crack. Crunch. Blood trickled from the corner of his lips. Malary didn't flinch. He just cleaned his blade, watching the dark smear of monster ink glow faintly in the motel lamplight. Dogdin stared straight ahead, his pupils dilated, voice distant.
I see the Wendigo's birth. It broke open its own ribs to let the cold inside. A hole lives where its heart was. Not a metaphor. A hole. An absence. It smells like marrow. And sermons. And dead pine.
He swallowed, then whispered.
It's waiting in the logging mill.
Outside the window, the snow howled. Only it wasn't the wind. It was breathing. Long, slow, human breaths. Something was walking the motel roof, scraping antlers across the shingles. A low moan shook the glass. Malary didn't look away from his blade. He whispered to Dogdin.
Tomorrow, we burn it from the inside.
Dogdin clutched the codex.
No, we starve it from the inside.
The light bulb popped. Darkness swallowed the room like a throat closing. Chapter 3: The Road to Larch Hollow. Morning didn't come. The sky was stuck in a permanent state of bruised twilight. Sunlight barely crawling through the clouds like a sick thing on its belly. Snowflakes hung in the air too long. Some never landed. Malary stood by the Impala, breath curling from his lips in clouds that didn't fade. He opened the trunk. Inside, ropes soaked in holy oil, blades honed on tombstone grit, shells etched with runes that bled when touched, a flask filled with the last breath of a drowned bishop, and Dogdin's satchel of relics, one of which had started weeping sometime during the night. They drove north into the deep woods, into that white silence, a silence so loud it felt like the earth had gone deaf just to forget what it heard. Trees loomed like black fingers. The frost was thicker than skin. Dogdin read aloud from the codex in a whisper, not to Malary, but to the thing that might be listening.
Those who die of starvation do not die clean. Their spirits are stretched. Their names are forgotten. And when their bones freeze hollow, something else climbs inside.
Malary's eyes stayed locked on the road, even when it vanished under snow. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The closer they got, the more the runes on his neck began to twitch, like worms under skin, like muscle memory, waking up to old pain. Then a sign appeared, Larch Hollow, population 77. Someone had crossed out the 77, beneath it written in charcoal, "They cometh." The town unfolded slowly, like a scab peeling off. Log cabins rotted from the inside out. Mailboxes bled rust. No sound, no footsteps, only the sound of chewing in the far wood. Rhythmic, wet. They passed a playground. The swing creaked in the wind, though the chains were broken. A doll sat in the snow, smiling with half a jaw. Its mouth was stuffed with tiny bones, bird bones. They parked near the old sawmill. It was a corpse of a building. Wood splintered, roof collapsed, windows scratched, not shattered, as if something inside had wanted to see out but never leave. Malary lit a cigarette. The match hissed like it had struck flesh. He looked at Dogdin, finally speaking for the first time in hours.
You ever seen one like this?
Dogdin shook his head.
I've read about them, but this one's wrong. It's bigger, smarter, and still thinks it's holy.
He reached into his coat and handed Malary a small, writhing rune, burned into leather.
The rune of unbecoming. It'll keep your thoughts your own for a while.
Malary slapped it onto his bare chest. It hissed, sunk into the flesh. Didn't even blink. They walked toward the mill. With each step, the ground grew softer. Despite the snow, it squished, like walking on raw meat. Steam rose from cracks. The air stank of old prayers, spoiled incense, regret, and something else. Something that made the back of Dogdin's throat tighten, like he was about to weep. Grief. So thick you could drown in it. Then they heard it. Not a roar, not a growl, but a sermon. Whispered from deep within the collapsed structure, a voice like ice cracking over a lake filled with corpses.
I gave them my body, and when they chewed through it, I gave them my soul. They spit that out, so I became what they could not digest.
Dogdin stumbled back, clutched his ears, blood leaked between his fingers. Malary just grinned.
Good. It talks.
He stepped forward, drawn blade in one hand, the rune of unbecoming burning like a brand on his skin. Dogdin called after him.
Mal, if it's still thinking like a man, it'll lie. It'll beg. It'll sound like someone you lost.
Malary didn't turn around.
I've lost everyone.
He entered the mill and the doors closed behind him, on their own. Chapter 4, The Chapel with No Eyes. The mill didn't scream, it breathed. A long, slow exhale that came from deep within the timbered rot. like the building itself had lungs stitched into its foundation. Malary stepped forward, no flashlight, just the glow of his burning rune, pulsing over his chest like a slow heartbeat. The walls wept. Not a metaphor, not exaggeration. Sap mixed with blood oozed from the seams of rotted beams. He passed a crucifix nailed upside down to the rafters. On it, no Christ, just a rack of antlers, still twitching. Outside, Dogdin watched the town. Locals had begun to emerge, slowly, carefully. Thin shadows wrapped in coats too big for their bones, eyes hollow, some gouged out entirely. Dogdin approached an old man, dragging a sled covered in burlap. The man stopped, didn't speak, just stared through him with sockets full of snow. Dogdin crouched.
What did you see?
The priest promised salvation. We were so hungry. He said the body of Christ was within him.
The man lifted the burlap from the sled. Inside, a pile of femurs, clean, stacked like kindling, and on top a Bible written on human skin, its ink still wet. Dogdin stepped back, trembling. He turned to the others. The townsfolk gathered without sound. A woman cradled a bundle wrapped in blood-stained linen, humming. The cloth slipped. Not a baby, just a rib cage, small, chewed, still twitching. Back in the mill, Malary descended deeper. Stairs cracked beneath him, soaked in frozen bile. Every step echoed like it was swallowed. Every corner breathed. He entered a large chamber, once a chapel, now a nest. Pews torn apart, floors smeared with claw trails and burned handprints. On the far wall, a pulpit, but instead of a priest, just bones stacked in the shape of a man. Eyes made of coals, flesh made of wind and teeth, a crown of antlers blooming from its back like roots from a grave, and it spoke.
"You are the blade,"
the Wendigo said. Its voice was deep, splintered, spoke through layers of other voices, male, female, child.
"You are the eater of beasts. I know your name. I wore it before."
Malary didn't blink, didn't move. The Wendigo's jaw cracked, dislocated.
"You killed your brother, Malary, and buried him under ash. You wear the skin of regret. You and I, we are the same."
Malary didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a second blade, shorter, jagged, etched with an older rune. One Dogdin warned him not to use unless the creature spoke like a man. The Wendigo stepped from the altar. Its bones creaked like a tree swaying in a hurricane. Its limbs were wrong, too long, backwards in places, and its belly caved in, gnawed from the inside. It circled him.
"You know hunger, but do you know emptiness? The kind that speaks, that sings. They begged me not to eat, so I ate the voice that told me not to. I became the silence between prayers."
Malary lunged. Steel struck bone, sparks flew. The creature didn't scream, it laughed. As it bled snow, frozen flakes of skin and teeth. It reached for Malary's face, its fingers burned. On the rune of unbecoming, it hissed, reeled back. Malary's blade found its side again, this time deeper. The Wendigo staggered, bones snapping in protest. Outside, Dogdin felt it, a pressure, like gravity reversed. The townspeople fell to their knees. Some screamed, some prayed, some began to chew their own fingers. Dogdin opened the codex, his fingers bleeding from the pages themselves. He drew a circle in the snow with his own blood, spoke the rite of bone banishment.
Return your teeth to the womb. Let the frost reclaim its lie. Hunger feeds no god here.
The wind screamed. The Wendigo howled from inside the mill. Malary drove the blade into its throat, deep. The creature staggered back, dragging a trail of frost behind it. Its antlers cracked, and then it said,
You will never know if the brother you buried stayed dead. You never opened the casket, did you?
Malary's hand trembled. The creature smiled. And then the floor collapsed. Malary fell with it, into the dark, into the layer beneath the chapel. The Wendigo followed. Chapter 5. The Hunger Trial. The fall wasn't measured in seconds, it was measured in depth. Each foot deeper took something from him. Memory, warmth, meaning. Malary hit the bottom hard, ribs cracking against permafrost and ice-coated bones. The air was wet, not with water, with breath. And there in the dark, not one Wendigo, dozens, statues, frozen forms of what had once been men, well, women, children, locked mid-transformation, clawing at their own faces, mouths stretched into endless starving O's, flesh consumed, eyes devoured by things inside the skull. And all of them stared at him, even the eyeless ones, especially the eyeless ones. Above, Dogdin dropped to his knees in the blood-drawn circle. His body was shaking. The townsfolk were screaming now, each in their own way. Some bit themselves, others whispered sermons in broken tongues. A woman tried to eat the snow. The snow turned black in her mouth. Dogdin held the codex open with shaking hands. Time to see. He took the last tooth from the jar. It was still warm, still alive. He swallowed it whole, and the world changed. He stood inside Father Briar's mind, inside his fast, inside the famine. It was a church made of antlers and crucifixes woven from human spines, pews of flayed skin, candles made of fingers. He saw the priest again, gaunt, hollow, cheeks sunken deep, praying until his tongue cracked open like dried leather.
I fasted because I loved them. They were dying, so I offered myself. But they didn't want salvation. They wanted a meal.
The image trembled, warped.
They gnawed me piece by piece until I found God inside the marrow. And he was starving too.
Dogdin gasped, snapped out of the vision, the taste of bone still in his throat. Below, Malary was bleeding. The Wendigo was circling, now no longer just a beast. It shifted with each breath between man and monster, between prophet and predator. A face that flickered with his mother's eyes, his brother's voice, his own hands.
I don't kill to eat. I eat to remember.
Malary tried to move, wouldn't. One leg was broken. The rune on his chest had cracked. The glow dimmed. It stepped closer, lifted a single gnarled claw, pressed it gently to his temple.
I'll show you what he felt when you buried him alive.
Dogdin's voice roared from above. The rite of hunger trial.
Let the eater be fed. Let his throat burn with truth. Let his stomach reject the lies of flesh.
A shockwave burst through the ground. The Wendigo screamed, a sound like metal snapping inside a child's lung. Its body spasmed, rotted antlers split, its belly burst open, pouring out pages, sermons, flesh-writ scripture. It staggered back, fell against the frozen wall. Malary rose. Slowly, he touched the rune on his arm, the one Dogdin etched in sleep with his own fingernail. A rune not for protection, not for power, but for clarity. And Malary saw it for what it truly was. Not a god, not a prophet, not his brother. Just a man who begged to be devoured so others wouldn't be. And when no one listened, he chose to become what they feared. Malary stepped forward, one last blade in hand, the one carved from his own shin bone. The Wendigo looked up at him. Its mouth moved.
It still hurts.
Malary whispered, "So does being hungry," and plunged the blade straight through its heart. Above, the town let out a breath. Every house sighed, every voice fell silent. The snow stopped falling. For now. Dogdin collapsed. Blood trickled from his nose. Malary climbed out of the mill, shirt torn, flesh cracked with frostbite. His blade was gone. His eyes were wet. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Dogdin asked,
Did he talk?
Malary didn't answer, just walked to the car and started the engine. The Wendigo's body stayed below, frozen, still, but its eyes were open and smiling. Chapter 6, Into the Moor. They returned at night, not because it was wise, because they had no other choice. The Wendigo hadn't died, not truly. Its body had stopped, but the town had not. The next morning, a child had eaten her own fingers in her sleep. A man gouged his stomach open and screamed, "I need to make room for it." The thing in the mill wasn't just a beast anymore. It was a seed planted in the roots of Larch Hollow, and it had begun to grow again. Malary stood at the edge of the logging camp. The snow didn't fall here anymore. It hovered mid-air, frozen in time. The temperature dropped, but he didn't feel it. The runes on his chest were blistering, burning. He tore off his coat, exposed his flesh to the cold and the ink. The marks writhed like snakes beneath his skin. 3 were fresh. Dogdin had carved them in silence that morning, with teeth pulled from the Wendigo's altar. Rune 1, Thirstless Flame, burns hunger at the source. Rune 2, Bloodless Resolve, immunity to seduction, to voices wearing the masks of lost loved ones. And Rune 3, Bone Ward Gate, slows the regeneration of a creature made from sin. Dogdin had bled for hours to make them, and when he finished, he whispered,
If it speaks in his voice again, Don't listen. Just kill it.
Malary didn't respond. He never did when death was near. He walked into the mill alone. It had changed. The inside was alive. Walls pulsing, flesh grown over rafters, eyes opened and closed in knots of wood and tendon. A ribcage made from children's cribs stretched across the ceiling. Maggots fed on candles made of priest fat. A tongue hung from a chandelier twitching. The Wendigo wasn't waiting this time. It was feeding. It crouched in the center of the chapel floor, hunched over something squirming. A woman, half swallowed, still alive, weeping. Her face already changed, cheekbones sharpened, jaw elongated, teeth black. She looked up, saw Malary. She reached toward him and gasped. It's so beautiful. It fills you where the loneliness lives. He didn't hesitate. A quick step, a flash of silver. The kukri sliced through her spine, clean, merciful. She didn't scream, just smiled. Thank you, she whispered, before her throat filled with snow and bile. The Wendigo looked up, lips coated in viscera. It didn't speak. It roared. Malary didn't flinch. He charged, blade in one hand, flare in the other. The flare hissed. Its glow summoned back the runes. His skin split along the tattoos as the runes activated. The Wendigo moved like a shadow, twisting, folding. One moment tall as a pine, the next a beast on all fours. It struck. Malary blocked with bone-plated gauntlets. The claws scraped. Sparks flew. The heat from his body seared into the creature's limbs. Flesh bubbled. He slashed back, caught the Wendigo across the chest. No blood, just frost, and the sound of a child sobbing from inside the wound. It lunged too fast. Claws tore into Malary's side. Ripped runes tore muscle. He stumbled, hit the floor hard. The Wendigo dropped onto him, held him down. Its face inches from his, and then in a voice he hadn't heard in years. His brother's voice. It said,
"You let me down, Mal. You didn't even dive in. You said you loved me, then watched the river take me."
Malary's breath caught. The pain was gone, the cold soothing. He closed his eyes, felt his body slow, felt the Wendigo opening the door inside him, and then fire. From his chest, from the runes, the thirstless flame ignited. His blade erupted with red heat. He screamed and swung. The blade caught the Wendigo under the jaw, split its mouth, tore through the lies. The voice vanished. Now it screamed in its true voice, no longer human, just pain and hunger. They fought through the chapel of rot, through burning scripture and bones, through tongues nailed to pews. Every wound he dealt slowed it, every hit he took made it faster. But he wasn't fighting to kill it. Not yet. He was fighting to find the heart, the real one, buried deep inside the Wendigo's chest, frozen, still beating. The flare burned out, only darkness now, and the sound of breathing his and something else's. Chapter 7. A Mind of Teeth. Dark, but not the kind of dark you see. The kind that touches, that brushes across the gums, that crawls behind your eyelids and tells you something here, and it's wearing your face. Malary breathed slow, slower than the pain. The Wendigo circled him. Its antlers scraped the ceiling. Antlers now fused with faces. Each tine held a mouth, whispering, Some begged, some laughed. One sang a lullaby Malary's mother used to hum before the walls burned. He gripped his kukri, ragged edge soaked in blackened frost. His wrist throbbed. One of the runes had ruptured. Bloodless resolve, now leaking heat into his veins. He wouldn't be able to resist much longer, and the Wendigo knew it. It stepped closer.
You remember the river?
Its breath like curdled milk and rotting snow.
You stood there, watching your brother struggle. Said nothing, did nothing, because it was easier than pulling him back.
Malary said nothing. He watched, waited.
You wanted him to drown, because you wanted the grief. Because grief is power, isn't it, Malary? It makes you feel alive.
A flicker of rage, just enough to make his finger twitch. The Wendigo smiled.
You didn't even open the casket.
Malary moved fast, blind. Blade met bone. Steel shrieked. The Wendigo staggered. Its ribcage split open like a spider, cracking its own shell. Inside, teeth, rows, dozens, not lining a mouth, but replacing a heart, gnashing, grinding, a heart made of mouths. It screamed.
You think I fear death? I am what's left when death forgets to come.
The room shifted. Suddenly, Malary was underwater. The chapel gone. No roof, no floor, only a black river and hands pulling him down. Dogdin's voice echoed through the dark.
It's the mind trick, a defense. Don't believe the water. There is no river. There is only the teeth.
Malary closed his eyes, felt the pain, held onto it. Pain was real. Grief was real. But guilt? Guilt was a gift the monster wanted him to keep. He opened his eyes, back in the chapel. The Wendigo charging, all limbs, all hunger, screaming in 16 stolen voices. He dodged, sliced, lunged. A second blade in hand now, the shiv of regret, forged from the femur of a woman who ate her own child to survive the winter of 53. Dogdin had found it buried beneath the church. It doesn't kill. It makes monsters feel what they've stolen. Malary jammed it straight into the Wendigo's core, right between the teeth that beat like a heart. The creature froze, twitched, and then it remembered. It remembered every name, every bite, every cry. It heard them again, felt them. Every scream carved into its bones, every last breath it had inhaled. It dropped to its knees, snow pouring from its mouth. Its hands clutched its chest. The teeth inside began to choke, gnashing, gnawing, tearing into itself. And then it spoke. Not a monster's voice, not a priest's, just a man. A broken, tired man.
I didn't mean to become this. I just didn't want to disappear.
Malary knelt beside it. The Wendigo was shrinking, skin sloughing, antlers snapping, a human face beneath it all. Gaunt, sunken, eyes red. Father Briar. He looked up, smiled with what was left of his mouth.
Tell them I tried. Tell them I only wanted to be full once more.
Malary nodded and slit his throat. No roar, no scream, just silence, and then the wind outside stopped. No more breath in the chapel, no more whispers from the rafters, no more faces in the wood. Just bone and ash and Malary, bleeding and alone. Dogdin entered moments later, eyes wide. He looked at the corpse, then at Malary.
Malary, are you all right?
Malary shook his head. Dogdin sat beside him anyway. They sat in the chapel of rot, side by side. The snow outside finally began to fall. Soft, natural, honest. But deep beneath the floorboards, a single tooth twitched. Chapter 8. The Bone Howler Falls. They buried the priest in black salt, 4 feet under the chapel floor, spine broken, tongue removed, body folded into a casket carved from the pews he once preached upon. Dogdin stitched holy runes into the lining with thread soaked in wolfsbane and remorse. Malary broke the man's femurs and placed them in an X across his chest. No soul travels with straight bones. They said no words. They burned no candles. They lit the grave with teeth. The last ones they could find, cracked, broken, still warm. Some were children's, some not. Outside, the townsfolk began to wake. Those who hadn't been taken fully were vomiting up flakes of snow, coughing up names they couldn't remember speaking. A girl screamed for her sister. A man bit off his own fingers before realizing his hands were clean again. Someone lit the church bell on fire. No one stopped them. Malary stood at the edge of the forest. The storm had finally broken. The trees were visible again, not as shadows but trees. He was still bleeding. His right eye was half blind. One of the ruins had gone black, dead inside the flesh. He didn't care. He'd killed gods with less. Dogdin joined him, his coat torn, hands burned from the ritual he'd sealed into the floorboards. In his satchel, the codex of teeth was gone. It had turned to dust after the final rite. Fine, powdery ash that smelled like wet pine and regret. He didn't mourn it, he just said,
The Wendigo. You know, it wasn't the last of them.
Malary nodded, but he was the first that begged. Behind them, the chapel sank, timbers cracking, flesh melting, and from its depths came a sound, not a scream, not a groan, but a howl. Long, empty, carried by the wind through trees too old to forget it. A howl without lungs, without throat, just memory. The Wendigo was gone, but the bone howler remained. Not a creature, but a curse. It had planted itself in every regret left behind. Malary turned to Dogdin. Mark me, he said. Dogdin pulled out the silver needle, dipped it into the ash of the codex, etched a single rune into Malary's back, just beneath the shoulder blade. A symbol that meant, I devoured what devours. Malary flinched once, then was still. When it was done, Dogdin whispered,
You carry a hunger now. Something empty found a shape in you.
Malary exhaled, Let it stop. They didn't stay. No thanks, no farewells. They left before dawn. Miles away, a crow followed them. It was missing one wing. It flapped with the rhythm of a broken metronome. In its beak, a single tooth, still twitching, still whispering. Somewhere north, another town is starving, and something waits in the trees, wearing the face of the last person you loved, just to see if you'll listen. And this ends the case of the Wendigo and the Bone Howler. You've heard the tale of the Bone Howler. You've walked with Malary and Dogdin through a chapel of rot, into a hunger that wears a man's face, and now you know. Some monsters never die. They wait, just beneath the frost, just behind your grief. And let's have a look at the themes covered in today's episode. Hunger as corruption. At its heart, the Wendigo is hunger incarnate, both physical and spiritual. The story shows how starvation twists not just the body, but the soul. The priest's attempt to fast for faith curdled in something obscene, a hunger so deep it's become immortal. Hunger here isn't just about food, it's about desire, obsession, the need to be filled by something that will never satisfy. The Wendigo doesn't simply eat flesh either, it devours regret. It weaponizes the past, forcing Malary to relive the drowning of his brother, to confront the guilt he carries, and in this way the monster is not just a predator of bodies, but of minds. This theme touches on how grief and guilt, if left unchecked, can consume you until nothing human remains. It covers topics of isolation and starvation of the soul. The setting, Larch Hollow, is more than just a backdrop. The snow-buried dying town reflects the theme of emptiness, isolation that starves people of connection, of hope or warmth. The Wendigo feeds on that isolation. Every abandoned home, every silent window in this story reminds us that loneliness itself can be a predator. And lastly, the curse of survival. The surviving townsfolk, even after the Wendigo's death, are forever marked by what they endured. Vomiting snow, gnawing off their own fingers. Survival isn't triumph here, it's another kind of haunting. The message is clear. Sometimes living through horror is the greatest curse of all. So, today's tale didn't just give us a monster to fear, it gave us a mirror, showing hunger, regret, and the human instinct to consume or be consumed. And that brings us to the end of tonight's tale, my friends. Thank you truly for working with me through the frost, through the chapel of rot, and through the hunger that would not end. Your ears and hearts are the fire that keeps stories, fables, ghostly tales alive. If you'd like to wander deeper into the woods with me, you can always find me at storiesfablesghostlytales.com or join me on my Patreon, which is www.patreon.com/SFGT, where your support helps carve these stories from bone and ink. And now a special moment of gratitude. Tonight's journey through the Wendigo Hollow hunger was made possible by the warmth of my Patreons. And first up is my Ode Night Tea Titan, the one and only Matto Star. Matto, your support burns like the ruin or remorseful fire itself, warding off the cold, giving me the strength to carry these stories through the storm. Without you, I might have been lost in the Wendigo's maw myself. So, Matto Star, consider this tale's silence, this fading snow, and this weary voice my great and haunting thank you. Thank you for your undying support, a shining bright warmth in the blizzard and snow. Have a wonderful, brilliant week, Matto Star, and thank you for being my friend. Have a kick-ass week, Matto. And now to my white tea warlords, whose presence is like ruined, etched into my skin, protecting me from the dark. Lesosaurus Rex, the strength of your gem-forged arms could snap antlers like kindling. If Malary had you by his side in Larch Hollow, the Wendigo would have fled back into the trees before the first strike. My friend, you lift iron, so the rest of us don't have to lift curses. Have a kick-ass week ahead, a brilliant gym session, and thank you for your support and friendship. Here's to more horror stories just around the corner, Leza. And my next white tea warlord, Maya, the queen of cats. I imagine you at the edge of the snowstorm, 1,000 feline eyes gleaming behind you. Even the Wendigo, with its hunger for flesh and memory, would hesitate to challenge a ruler with claws so sharp and 9 lives to spare. To reign over cats is to reign over shadows. Thank you, Maya, for your immeasurable support as well, your friendship, and have a fantastic week ahead. And to my final white tea warlord, wonderful Sangeetha the Seer. You are the Dogdin of our circle, reading omens in tea leaves, whispers, and frost. You'd have seen the bone howler coming long before its sermon reached the chapel floor. Your sight keeps us alive. Your visions cut deeper than any blade. Thank you so much, Sangeetha, for your support and friendship. To my white tea warlords, I give my gratitude. Your strength, your sovereignty, and your sight have carried me through this storm. And of course, now, to my Earl Grey enforcers and all tiers thereafter, I am lucky to have Chad Warren, Divided by Zero, Juicebox Andy, Just Heather, Paige Kramer, Peter Raffaelli, Seductive Smiles, Jane Gumnick, and Michael Corrupt. Thank you so much for your support, legends. This has been Stories, Fables, Ghostly Tales, your tale teller. Until next time, keep your casket closed and your fire burning, because the hunger is listening. Have a great week.
Heavy silence in the pine. A priest still prays with an empty spine. Bones for sermons, teeth for hymns. The hunger begins where the body ends. No fire survives when the frost remembers. The Wendigo screams and the soul dismembers. Malary carves runes in skin that bleeds. Dogdin drinks grief from the ghost of teeth. The chapel burns with a mouth of stone. Every prayer ends in marrow and bone. Feed me sorrow, feed me grief. The casket never closes, silence always knows this. The hunger wears your brother's face and calls you home. No fire survives when the frost remembers. The Wendigo screams and the soul dismembers. Teeth in the heart, regret in the veins. The priest was a prophet, but prophets decay. Hollow hunger carved in the snow. It eats what you hide and the things you won't show. The bone howler falls, but the silence stays. The hunger will rise in another place. Thank you, legends, you light up the night. Thank you, supporters, you lift us so high. Star, Lessosaurus, Maya, Sangitha, we sing your names. You shine like the sky.